in the background from last night. Obviously, the second half was a little better than the first. Let this play. I'll take your questions here in the chat. If you want to turn the stream down, you can go down to the sound icon on the bottom left side and figure that out. All right, so let's go one by one here with some of the questions, and then we'll just hit on some stuff from last night. This is pretty informal today. Does the Triple J success make a trade more or less likely? Herro expendable now. I really don't think it means anything right now in terms of transactions for a couple of reasons. One is the Heat kind of expected this. And I know people thought I was crazy when I said this 2 weeks ago on the pod, and then I think here also, but they view Jaquez as a core piece for the future. When I've talked to high-level people in the Heat organization, they say Bam, Tyler, Jaime. So that doesn't seem to indicate that a trade of Tyler is imminent just because Jaime is playing at a high level. I said this last night on Twitter. They pretty much found a way to solve the non-Jimmy minutes, which is draft a Jimmy-like player. But I also think that one of the things we'll get into today on the podcast, and Greg and I are going to do one this afternoon, is that it does extend the Jimmy window a little bit. Because if Jaime can do some of the things that Jimmy already does, then Jimmy doesn't have to do them for as many minutes. So that's a positive. And additionally, if whenever Jimmy does move on, either to retirement or somewhere else. I don't think it'll be somewhere else. I think at some point he's just going to decide he wants to play tennis and sell coffee. They have a player to step into that role who's in the same age bracket as Bam and Tyler. So I don't think this affects Tyler in a negative way. I do think one of the things we will hit on the podcast as Tyler gets closer to returning is how the two of them look together, because we're starting to see the chemistry between Jaime and Duncan. It was immediate. Like they just feed off each other's cuts. That was from instantaneous. And I talked to Duncan about that, and that's been a real positive. But now you're starting to see it. You saw it last night, big time way with Josh and Jaime. And you're starting to see it a little with Caleb and Jaime and with Jimmy and Jaime. So that's, some of your core players and your wing players who are interchangeable with your 22-year-old rookie. Now we just got to see what it looks like with Tyler. I don't think that Tyler is going to have the kind of usage when he comes back that he did before he left. I don't think that it's reasonable to expect him to score 24, 25. First, he's going to be working himself back into shape. This was not a hand injury. This was an ankle injury. So he has been off his feet more than he was when he had the injury last year during the postseason. So it's going to take him a little bit of time to ramp up. But additionally, they found some different ways to play. And I don't think that he has to be as ball dominant all the time. I think that it will be more so when he doesn't have Jimmy out there with him. They can stagger them even more. And especially when they don't have, and if they don't have Jimmy or Jaime out there with him, then he'll get the kind of touches that he had before. But I don't think this affects Tyler in a negative way long term. He's 23. Jaime's 22. Bam is 26. I mean, there's your core. Now, Jovic is 20. We'll see. They describe Jovic as an if. They have not ruled it out that he's going to be part of their core, but he also could be the piece that's traded, or he could just not develop in their system. We don't know yet, but we saw it with Jaime immediately, and I keep saying this too. Every week we're going to say that what he did the week before was nothing. That's the trajectory he's on. There's going to be some bumps, but they seem to be very small for him, and then he just does something more, and it does remind me a lot of Dwayne's rookie year. And I covered that rookie year pretty much every game. I was in almost every game. And Dwayne was playing out of position because he's playing point guard, but he had some ups and downs. But every night there was something else that you're like, okay, and then something else, and then something else. And then we saw this a little with Tyler in his rookie season too. So we'll get into where Jaime kind of ranks in Heat history as rookies. We're gonna have some fun with that today on the podcast. Would they consider DeMar? It comes in from K-Tech. Would they consider DeMar if the price was Lowry and Jovic? I don't think so because of the positional thing. Well, a couple things. One, they say they don't care about traditional positions, but you need somebody who's a standard point guard. On the roster, so they would have to find somebody from somewhere else. If you're not getting Caruso back, then you've got to find that player, because we saw it even last night. Like, they closed the game and Josh played very well, but there was some iffy moments with, you don't want Josh being your primary ball handler down the stretch of every game in every important sequence. They got to have somebody else there. Now they're giving more of that to Jaquez, and he's handling the ball at the top. And of course, Jimmy can do it, and Bam can do it, and Caleb can bring the ball up. Like, it's not like they don't have any options, but they need one point guard on the roster. So I've always felt if they're going to trade Kyle, they got to get a point guard back. And I look, I love DeMar personally, but there's some real flaws to the idea of adding DeMar. Okay, like, first thing, he's Jimmy, but not as good, and he occupies a lot of the same spots on the floor. We know, and he hit one against the Heat in their win against Miami, which looks ridiculous now in retrospect. But like, that's not his game. He's not a stretch the floor type player. He's never been a great defender, even when he had real plus athleticism early in his career. He's a great locker room guy. He's just a good dude. He's a very good player. I don't think he's a fit for them. I don't. That's not where you would invest the asset right now. Sylvander pops in here. Would you trade Jaquez for Lauri Markkanen? I personally wouldn't. I'll hang up and listen. Honestly, I'm not going to use the word untouchable, but I don't think they're trading Jaime Jaquez for pretty much anything. Jaime Jaquez was not part of the conversation for Dame Lillard. So he's not going to be part of the conversation for Lauri Markkanen.
I mean, that was before he started looking like what he's looking like right now.
M. Jackson comes in. Do you see Spo consistently using a wing lineup 1 to 4 and then Bam anchoring moving forward? I think that he could do a lot of that. Now, we saw it last night where they didn't even play a center at times. If you add Love's minutes, I didn't even realize this in a real way until I looked at the minute counts this morning, but if you add Love's minutes, Bryant's minutes, and Robinson's minutes, there were a lot of minutes without a center at all. So I think he's willing to do that, to play the wings. All the wings can handle. Now, I say that as I say they do need someone like Lowry on the roster, especially now that they don't have Drew Smith, but they're all making plays. Like, these are not wings who are just stand in the corner wings. Like maybe Haywood, okay? Although even Haywood's not. Haywood struggled, I thought, really for maybe the second time this season last night. Halliburton's so good that even Haywood couldn't handle it. Like, when he would crowd him on the 3-point line, he made 30-footers or he drove by ridiculous. Him. Okay, and Haywood was really a non-factor offensively, and he's not the intuitive playmaker, ball handler that Jaquez is, and even that Josh and Caleb are. So I don't know that I would necessarily include him as one, or even that Duncan is at this stage, or Tyler. So I think Haywood may not be in some of those conversations that we thought he would be in. I think he'll be more situational as a defender, but they could play the 4 wings. To me, the key with playing the wings is getting Duncan out there with them, because he's creating space for them to operate. I mean, now look, Indiana's awful defensively. But I mean, Caleb had so much time. There were a couple of his baseline plays. He had so much time to make decisions. But some of that is the space that Duncan is taking up here. From our friend Lynette, go to insurancebylynette.com. How serious is the Bam injury? I don't think it's serious, but I think it's a concern. Is that fair? It's not serious. Like, I don't think this is going to keep him out for any long period of time. But it does seem to be recurring, because this came up about a month ago. And now this is the 3rd time that he's had to miss time, either a full game or a half game, because of it. So, we'll get more of a report on it tomorrow. I would not be stunned if they hold him out tomorrow night, just looking at the schedule upcoming. I think they feel like they can play a certain way against this Indiana team even without him. So I think they may let him rest in the next game. Spo held him out in the second half. He wanted to play. He's always going to want to play, but I think in this particular case, I'm going to go to put something else on here. But I just think that if you look at Bam's situation, again, I don't think you want to force it at this stage of the season and make it more than it is. But it's not like a surgical type deal. It's, it seems to be more maintenance, similar to what Jimmy's knee is, I would say. But again, we'll see how long that keeps him out. This not a question, comes in from Ryan. It's Jaime's salary that puts him over the top. Having someone making $5 million a year and a handful of years is too valuable. And this gets back to something that I threw on Twitter today.
Damn,
everybody wants the Heat to trade their picks. I was okay with them trading some of their picks to get Dame. But, I mean, let's look at what they've done with their last 5 first-round picks, none of which have been, lottery, the back-end lottery, a couple of them, and none of them in the top 10. they've gotten two foundational pieces in Bam and Tyler, one of whom is a top 15 player in the NBA, and the other whom is a 20-plus point scorer. And they've gotten a guy who is ready from minute one and looks like a top 5 rookie. Now, they also took Precious, who's a functional NBA player, but nothing more, and they whiffed on Maxey. We know that. Everybody's going to whiff on one or two there. A lot of teams whiffed on Maxey. And then Jovic we don't know yet, but certainly the potential's there. Well, if you can operate that well in the middle of the first round to the back end of the first round, maybe you should keep your picks, because in the modern apron NBA, those picks are valuable. Adam, I'm not skipping your questions. Let me go back up. Hold on. Hello, Matt. Hello, Alex. And then I can turn this. I'm going to turn this. I didn't even notice that Turner or Ben popped in here. All right, so I'm going to let them come. Let me get to one more question here. Adam, any truth to DeRozan rumors? Was that your question? I addressed DeRozan. Yes, he would want to play in Miami. He's close with Jimmy. I feel like he'd want to play with Kyle, not be traded for him. But that doesn't mean that the Heat would have significant interest. They had interest 2 off seasons ago. But DeMar wasn't going to take the money that they were offering. Eternal, I do not hear you. Because I have my...
Can you hear me?
Now I do.
Can you hear me?
Hold on.
I just been up here talking and shit.
Yeah.
My name heard shit.
Minute ISO here. There you go. I prefer Kyle. Okay, Ray comes in. What did you? I'll take this one, and then I'll let Eternal take over here. Hold on. I didn't have my speakers on. I'm sorry. Ethan, what do you mean by SPO and Malone not liking each other? Okay, I'll just say this. I don't know that for sure that's the case. But I asked Spoelstra a question in training camp about how Mike Malone had said during the finals that one of their advantages was that they had functional size at every position. They didn't say necessarily an advantage over the Heat. They just said generally, as an organization, we tried to accumulate functional size. And we saw that in the finals because you had a guy like Aaron Gordon who could, at his size, who could switch, make all those kind of plays, etc. Murray's a big point guard. Obviously Jokic, right? But when I asked Spo the question, he got a little attitude with me about it, which he doesn't typically do with me. I've known Spo for 25 years at this point. And when he's upset with me about something, he'll pull me to the side after and explain it. But typically we don't have those interactions. So it was strange. And I mentioned it to someone who covers the Heat regularly. I'm not going to mention who said, I don't think that was you. He just doesn't like Mike Malone. And he mentioned something about a previous situation that he'd had with him. So it's secondhand, but the fact that Spo and I have had positive interactions since, I don't think that it was me, honestly. Alex says, speaking of the Nuggets, the Heat are better suited to face them than last season with this roster. I agree with Alex. Look at that. And then it seems like the team, I'll take final one. Team is more relaxed and having more fun than last year. I feel that, actually. I felt that in New York, even when they lost the 2 games up there, when I travel with them. It's a loose locker room, actually. Kevin has a lot to do with that.
Yeah, Kevin has a lot to do with that.
Yeah. A lot to do with that. But even guys who are competing with each other for minutes, I was just watching the interactions between Highsmith, Jay Rich, Caleb. They all seem to like each other. When I get out on the road more, I always get a better feel for that, and I'm going to start doing more of that. But there seems to be a pretty good vibe to this group. And Greg says that too.
It also feels from just watching how they play on the court and how they, react when things are going well. They all love Jaime.
Yes.
All of them. Josh especially.
Yes. Yeah, the Josh thing, actually, I didn't know that he thought that of. And then if you saw some of Josh's tweets over the past 12 hours, you noticed that.
Yeah, he loves the kid. He loves him.
Yeah. Yeah, they all seem to. There doesn't seem to be any of that kind of resentment that sometimes there is to rookies who get playing time. Part of it, and particularly guys playing the whole fourth quarter, but I think it is part of it that he just plays the right way. That is what usually will endear a guy to his teammates. If you're confident, but you also make plays for others, they're good with you. It's not that high a bar. As players get to know each other more personally, then some personal issues develop. over various things, most of which don't leak out through the media. But at least at the very beginning, it's just about how you play on the court. That's it.
I think also
I agree with it.
Ethan,
He's confident but not arrogant. I agree with Wade County about it. He's got a little arrogance to him, but I don't think it's a negative thing. Alex will make fun of me. He knows the word I'm going to use for him. Anyway, go ahead, Eternal.
I think also too the thing about Jaime is besides him playing the right way, he's just a really cool ass fucking person too though. Like he's one of those guys that is easily likable. Because he's a very chill person that you can just talk to. And you can kind of see the energy with them on the bench. You can see the energy, with them warming up before games. And you can see it on the court. Like you said, he doesn't have a selfish bone in his body. Everything is the right way. And Jimmy talked about it last night. Just he makes winning basketball plays, which is.
Well, I think, and I'm going to put some of his highlights of manifestation. Alex, I think I want to do that with people in the network. Why don't I just do that? Okay, let's address this. Alex says Tyler, Jimmy, Jaquez. Okay, you mean Tyler, Jimmy, and Jaquez all have different personalities. They're all alphas. Well, first thing, Alex, I would say 80 to 90% of the players in the NBA characterize somewhat that way, or else they wouldn't have reached that level.
Yeah.
Right? So we're just talking matters of degree here. Yeah. Do you think, and I'll throw this back at Alex in the chat, do you think that Bam had exhibited an alpha personality for most of his Heat tenure until like this season? Because thank you.
I think Bam was very timid the first 3 seasons.
No, I brought it back to Alex, and I'm getting a bunch of no's. Okay, do we think Duncan had exhibited an alpha personality until
the playoffs of last year?
Okay, well that came out of nowhere.
He had moments. Right? He had moments.
Right. 2020 season, yeah, but I think what happened though was. There was a bit of an imposter syndrome with Duncan because he was not supposed to be here. If you look at his path, and to a certain degree, Bam. Like, all right, let's look at the difference between Bam and Zoe, right? Okay, for those old enough of you to remember Zoe, because I was talking to Ira about this, who is old enough to remember Zoe, obviously, on Press Row the other day, and I was saying we were in New York, and I'm like, so Bam's 26. When Zoe was 26, was he this good offensively at this stage? And he goes, Ira did one of his, you're an idiot type looks to me, which I've been experiencing for about 25, 30 years myself. And he's like, no, of course not. Zoe couldn't dribble. Joe couldn't do this. The difference between the two of them, though, is Zoe was like alpha personality, like to the extreme from minute one in the NBA, right? But part of where does that come from? Zoe was the best player in high school in the country. Zoe was the most was the most heavily recruited player out there. Zoe was the number 2 overall pick in the draft. Zoe was the featured player in Georgetown, which had produced, when Mutombo was there, which had produced, Patrick Ewing, okay, and was a dominant type program. Yeah, Bam was at Kentucky, but he was the 4th option. So Bam has never been relied upon to be. And we know that it exhibits itself more on offense than defense. So he was never whereas Tyler, if you look at Tyler's path, Tyler, I think, had to develop that kind of personality because, someone who looks like Tyler's not supposed to be doing the things that Tyler does. Let's just be honest. Okay, there's a stereotype there that he had to push through, work through, etc. And he had to exhibit this sort of irrational confidence. I mean, Mario Chalmers is an alpha personality, right? A little different, but I mean, in similar. But yeah, thank you. He's the first season Bam's been out alpha like. I think Tyler, yes, Alex. Tyler is much quieter than Jimmy's, yeah. But I mean, Tyler has a certain snark to his personality. We agree on that, right? Like, I just think he's an alpha on the court. I think Tyler on the court believes he's the best player to ever play. And that's an alpha trait. When I've talked about the alpha thing with the role players, you look at Caleb. Like, Caleb should not be as confident as he is considering his path. But he is, I said, an alpha role player. Jaquez has that thing. I'm not a true alpha. Alex, we're just going through it. Anyway, you guys want to get in on this? Because otherwise, hold on. We got to pause here in this show. Sorry about that. There we go. Anyway,
I just really quick. I had to take a screenshot of what Alex said. So if anyone wants to use this in the future, go for it.
okay, that's fantastic. Thank you, appreciate that. I need all your seed predictions already. All right, let's get to that. Well, no, I want to talk to the YouTube guys about this because this is going to be a podcast theme here going forward. How does this look with Tyler? Eternal. Wait, did you turn off your mic again?
Yeah, he's muted and his camera's off, so I think he's doing something.
Ben, how does this look with Tyler?
What role?
I mean, he's going to come back as a starter. I mean, let's be serious here. They're not bringing Tyler Herro off the bench.
So I like that. I like using your jinx powers in this way. I don't know, honestly. Like, I feel like the rotations are going to look a little bit different. I think we're going to see Jimmy go back to, instead of playing the entire first, kind of coming out with maybe 4 or 5 minutes left, and then Tyler and Bam run the show for a little bit. And then Jimmy can come back in and play the entire second, maybe.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see some of this stuff where it's been Duncan, 3 wings, and a big. You can put Tyler in those lineups and can kind of do some of the same stuff.
And so who do you're replacing Duncan with Tyler in those lineups? Because then you are going to end up with a lot of Tyler Bam pick and roll, which is not the worst thing. But I'm just do you get the same space there? Let's say it's Jaquez. I don't know. Jaquez, Caleb, J. Rich, Bam, Tyler.
Jaquez, J. Rich, Bam, Tyler. Who was the other one? I'm sorry.
So Bam is the center. Tyler
That's
as
4.
your Tyler, and then your wings are Josh, Caleb, Jaime.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I mean, I like it. I feel like that's 5 guys who can in theory put the ball on the floor, like, to varying degrees of success. But like, you can do a lot of dribble penetration, kick out stuff there. And I think the biggest thing that's kind of come with Tyler's absence is Duncan finding himself makes him playable next to Tyler. His foul rate being as low as it has been, his willingness to put the ball on the floor, like him not being a nightmare on defense means you can get away with putting him next to Tyler. And especially with all the switchability you have around them, like, you could do some Tyler, Duncan, Josh, Jaime, or Josh, Caleb, and Bam stuff, and like, I feel good about it. It's not 3 negative defenders and 2 positives, or like 1 neutral and Bam trying to clean everyone up. It's, you go 2 negative defenders, 3 positive defenders, and you can survive with that. I feel good.
Yeah. Well, I don't think they have to have a lineup out there with more than 2 negative defenders. I mean,
that's not been the case in the past, though.
No, it hasn't. No, not when you had Dragic, Herro, and Robinson out there, or something along those lines.
None.
Or none, right? But they can absolutely avoid those lineups. I mean, most of their lineups actually should have 4+ defenders, where it's really only, again, how we're characterizing them, but Love or Herro or Duncan, although Duncan's been better this year. And Kevin does certain things defensively that are useful still. So it's not – they don't have, like, the huntable players as much, which, by the way, is going to mean that Tyler gets hunted more. And so that's going to – I know how the reaction to that is going to be on Twitter, because if he's playing with better defenders, yes, you can protect him more. And there are some things that he does very well off ball at this stage. But teams are going to go after whatever the weakest link is. And if he's the guy out there instead of Duncan, and he's playing with let's say Lowry's not out there, right, who obviously is huntable. And he's playing with, Caleb Highsmith Jaquez, or Caleb Jimmy Jaquez, or Highsmith Jimmy, Josh, okay, whatever. Tyler's the guy they're going to go after. That's just the way that it does it. And Alex is right. There is no way they're putting Herro on the bench. I don't see. I think that they would be more inclined to wait until he's beyond 100% ready, just so he's not on a minutes restriction, to avoid bringing him off the bench to start because of the optics of it. I don't think they're bringing him off the bench. I just think this is a SPO project, and it kind of tips us off to where we may go with a future podcast here. But this is just a SPO project to figure out how to stagger this thing. That's all. To get Duncan out there with some of these lineups that have been effective to create that kind of space. But Tyler Herro is a starting two guard in this league at this point, and that's how it's going to stay. I don't. It's not just an ego thing. He's a starting two guard in the NBA. Like, you don't. It comes back to and I don't, again, whenever I start drawing parallels to people like LeBron and Dwayne, everybody throws it back in my face. I'm not saying Tyler is either of them, but what I'm saying is it comes back to what Spo told me during the playoffs in both 13 and 14, which is if he just looked at the analytics and the lineup data, he would never play LeBron and Dwayne together. And then he looked at me and goes, but then I'd be a fucking idiot. Right? So, I just think that at a certain point, the lineup data matters, no question, but he's going to look at it, and then he's going to disregard it if he's got a feel for something else. And I think not just the optics, but again, just the fact that, again, he's a starting two guard in the NBA. He's earned that spot. He did nothing early this season to lose that spot. And I feel like sometimes, and not that the Heat's record is what everybody would love it to be. It's 11-8. It could be better. They dropped a couple games: the Chicago game, the Nets game, the Knicks game. Those 3 games, they should have gotten at least 2 of those, right? I'm talking about the Nets game down here, not the one up there, which was a scheduled loss. But the reality is, most of their problems are good problems right now. Their problems are like, okay, how is this guy going to play with this guy? Because they're both playing well, right?
Yeah. They have too many good players, and that's kind of incredible considering where we were around this time last year, where it's like, can they even survive 5 minutes without one of their 2 all-stars on the floor?
Right.
And now it's their bench won them the game last night.
Because they're surviving the non-Jimmy minutes because they have a Jimmy-like player.
Yeah.
It's like, if you can run the same actions with Jaquez, or some of the same actions that you run with Jimmy, then it's kind of like, a quarterback where if you have a quarterback that you're relying on, you want to have your number 2 quarterback be somebody who can still thrive in that system. NFL teams who have backups that don't make sense for that system. Like the Dolphins had Teddy Bridgewater behind Tua. Teddy doesn't do any of the things Tua does. Like, he doesn't get rid of the ball quickly. His reaction time is not good. He doesn't. None of Teddy's qualities, and he used to have some before he stopped caring about football, were Tua's qualities. That doesn't make any sense. I'm not saying Mike White does either, but typically you want to have your backup quarterback be somewhat similar to your starter so that you don't have to change everything. If you have a Lamar Jackson as your starting quarterback, you want to have a backup quarterback who can do some of those things. And now with Jimmy, they have a guy in Jaquez who they can run a lot of those actions. And like you said, they didn't have Jimmy or Bam on the floor at the start of the 4th quarter, or Tyler, right? And like, that unit did not struggle to score. Now, the Pacers suck defensively. I'm going to keep saying that. But they had a flow to their offense. And a lot of this is Josh just looks better. And that has helped. Let me get to a couple more of the questions here before we dip. Last night made me not trust question Haywood Highsmith on players like Hallie, De'Aaron Fox, Maxey. Anyone else feel that way potentially? I think it's fair to say that he had his roughest game defensively last night, but I also think it's fair to say that, particularly with Halliburton, you're talking about a guy who's like a top 5 to 10 player in the league this year. Yeah. Everybody's going to struggle. It's like saying Drew Holiday couldn't guard Jimmy in the playoffs last year. Who was guarding Jimmy? Right? No. When he's playing at that level.
Tyrese is one of those unique problems where it's like, if you give him space, he'll shoot from 30 feet. If you press up on him, he's big and strong enough to drive by you. And if you, double him, he's going to make the right pass every time. He's unbelievably good.
Yeah, no, he's insane. And I think... there's a whole discussion to have about that trade and whether they should have traded Fox and all that stuff. But yeah, I think
it's worked out for them, but they traded
it has on a temporary basis. When you're bad as long as they've been, it makes sense to make the deal, but to get Halliburton now, it's not the same contract obviously that it was at that time. I'm trying to find something else here. What else we got? Here we go. This is just some of the Jaime highlights here. I don't think this is a long clip, actually. But Jaquez is actually the facsimile of the Jimmy role, right? Right. I agree that Caleb was wrongly cast for that role, but he was the closest that they had.
You know what it is, Ethan? It's like when they released the Chrysler released the 300s, and everybody thinks it's a Phantom until the Phantom pulls up. And so when it's like, oh, Caleb does so many things, that you can, that you can replicate with Jimmy, and it's like, then Jaquez shows up and like, oh no, he actually looks like Jimmy, and that's crazy. Same way he goes about things. So I think, with what you're getting from Jaquez, again, not just offensively, defensively, he has been a problem. A problem. So I think you're just getting just so much of an equal all-around game from him that I understand why they didn't want to include him in the Dame trade. I wouldn't either.
They were never going to include him. They were never going to include him. I think now that I didn't know the degree of it at the time, but now that and this is before the conversations I had about him with a couple people were a couple weeks ago, so it was before this blow up. Like he was seeing it, but so this isn't just like after the fact. Okay, now he looks great. Yeah, we were never going to trade. Now that I process what was actually going on this summer with what I was told 2 weeks ago, they were never going to move him. They just weren't. Because I think they view it not just as everybody was like, okay, he's a plug and play player for this team. But they view him as the Jimmy replacement long term. That's a different thing.
You gotta
That's
be
not
careful
just
there,
saying
Ethan. That's disrespectful there. You gotta be careful now.
No, but hold on a second. See, this is the thing, and this is the thing that we do here with NBA players. Is we're always we start to talk about the finished product and the star or even the past their prime star and say that this guy who's his first year, second year, third year in the league can never become that. Well, all those guys were that before. And I go back, if you watch, and I saw a lot of Jimmy early in his career because the Heat were in those battles with Jimmy's teams. Okay,
he was a pest. He was a fucking pest, but he wasn't this.
He was a defensive. He was mostly a defensive specialist. He had offensive skills, but that was Rose's team, that was Deng's team, and he wasn't even the emotional heartbeat of that team. That was Noah. So, again, this idea that Jaime at 22 is a finished product and can't average 20. Look what Jimmy was doing at 22. Take a look at it, okay? It wasn't this. So, again, I'm not saying Jaime is going to – Jimmy has a drive that is uncommon, okay? And Jimmy has managed to maximize every skill he has because he does not have a 9 out of 10 athletic skill in any area that you would just – but he has maximized everything. He always said his greatest strength is his will. But Jaime seems to have some of that. So we'll see. He's got to avoid injuries. He's got to stay hungry. Shit happens to players as they get older. But to say that he can't be Jimmy, why? Why? Like, I don't understand that.
The thing also, too, Ethan, to add to that, though, is Jimmy last night, shout out to Alex. Shout out to Alex.
Question, Alex. That was a good question.
Jimmy last night said, he's so polished. A lot of the things he's doing, he didn't learn or start doing until he was 28, 29. Which also I feel like Jimmy is also being a little modest because his 14, for me, Jimmy started popping off and looking like an all-star his 14-15 season.
And then, was that his most improved year?
Yeah. Then from there, Jimmy just started looking like a maniac. So, I think
a lot of that was the trust that Tibbs put in him. I mean, I know everybody talked about overburdening Jimmy, which he did, but he wouldn't take Jimmy off the court, and Jimmy had to play to that level. And they had Jimmy guarding LeBron and Durant and, all the best players. I don't know what all the best players in the NBA.
Yeah.
And so, that's the thing is that there was a natural progression. And then, of course, Rose got hurt, right? And if Rose doesn't get hurt, I don't know that team turns over to Jimmy. And there was now they're close again, but there was friction between Rose and Butler at the time, which the Chicago reporters knew about. Kind of the transfer of that team from one to the other, and there were factions that Noah was involved, etc. Again, we don't know what's going to become of Jaime's career, but he couldn't have gone to a better place. He couldn't have a better mentor to fine-tune certain parts of his game. And he's playing right away. I mean, that's the thing on a team that is trying to contend. And not only is he playing right away, he's playing the big minutes right away. Yeah. I mean, he's leading them in minutes some nights, or he's in the top 2 or 3, and he's up there in fourth quarter minutes over the past 10 games. So I just don't – I think putting a ceiling on him, hat tip Greg
But
Savannah,
also, what I was going to say, Ethan, what I was going to say is, like, he spent so much time polishing his game before he got to the Heat. So he was going to be a good player, right? The thing that, like, is going to put rocket boosters on him and, like, fast-track his career is the very person that he was mimicking and imitating. He's on the team with him, and Jimmy is willingly teaching him. So all the stuff that you're seeing, like, he's getting those little tidbits, and it would be the same as if when, Wade, if Jimmy had went to the Heat his rookie year instead of the Bulls, and he was learning from Wade and LeBron, or if Kobe had been drafted by the Bulls and was learning directly from Jordan or whatever. Like, if you get a chance to learn directly from that person, and so you get to then cross-match everything that you have built on before, you know what I'm saying, you actually get to play with them, like, it's crazy to be able to sit down and study with them in live action, and they tell you, oh, do this, do that instead. And so, yeah.
And here's the other part of it. Well, he mentions like Scoot and Dame, right? But here's the difference, though. Scoot and Dame never would have worked because regardless of where Scoot is in his career at this stage, he needs the ball in his hands to grow, which Dame did also. But Jimmy and Jaime can play off of each other, so you can pair them together and they can do it in real time. This is a much more the thing I talk about with this roster a lot. I think Maybe Spo put this bug in my ear, and now I'm repeating a word. But like it's optionality.
Yeah.
Spo has a lot of optionality with this roster. He can play different wings in different situations for what he needs, and for a team that has not had a lot of like great wings over time beyond LeBron and Dwayne, I know, but I'm talking about some of the other pieces. They've sometimes struggled to add depth at that position.
Yeah.
It's a tool at Spo's disposal. Like this was the thing about Gabe and Max, and again, I like both players. I still believe that they probably should have kept Gabe at the very least, but that's the difference. We get back to the roster between this year and last year is if you're they're sort of you have to plug them in one spot pretty much. That's not the case with the wings that they have on this roster. So they just have a lot more. Flexibility. Anyway, I got to bolt to a meeting. If you guys want to hang for a bit, you can.
That's it.
But I appreciate. Yeah, we'll close it now. But thanks everybody for joining. Make sure that you're on our Discord. Okay, let me post the link here one more time before we go because the chat goes on there all day. We appreciate everybody who has joined over there. Let me just grab it. And we want to get more people chatting because we're going to add a video channel now also over there. And but I'm waiting until I get a few more subs. So let's get some more of you on there. Again, it's just $2.99 per month, and there you go. So we appreciate it. Thanks everybody for joining. There's the Discord. Click on it, and we'll be back tomorrow. I'll be at the game with Alex got the night off. I'll be at the game with Brady and with Gad. So we'll check in there. Thanks everybody.
Have a good day, y'all.